Good afternoon. The Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Currently, we do not have a quorum. As soon as we have quorum, we will continue, but we'll stay on recess until a quorum is established. Thank you. The Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Before we begin on the continuation of the second round, Number one, we have the panel here to explain the Typhoon Mawar's expenditure report. Once they explain it, then we will move on immediately after that. Mr. Art Mariano, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The speaker brought up earlier today regarding the overall amount of $50 million that was authorized in Public Law 3717 as amended by 3721. And to clarify, out of the $50 million that was authorized, approximately $28.1 million has been identified from the general fund for the purpose of the Typhoon Mawar recovery. And of that amount, and by the way, this was also explained during the SES meeting that was held, I believe, back in July. $20 million came from the appropriation to DOE. $3.1 million came from the appropriation from the debt service savings, which is, again, $3.1 million, and $4.95 million came from the FEMA reimbursement for non-congregate housing. Both of those amounts, $3.1 million and $4.95 million, are technically general fund sources. So those were tapped along with the $20 million that was appropriated to DOE. And that is showing on the report, of which the sum total is $28.1 million.
All right, thank you. Now we will proceed now to continue on round two. Three of our colleagues are not here, so automatically, if you're not present, you miss your turn. We continue on. Madam Speaker, you are up now in the second round. Senator Therese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our budget, I just wanted to ask about these BPT revenues. So it was stated earlier that the BPT is greatly increased over the governor's original proposal, greatly increased over FY23 projections, and our general fund revenues total available looks like 181 million more than pre-pandemic. So compared to 2019, we're 181 million more in the general fund revenues available for appropriation. So in 4 years, our total budget has increased $212 million. This is through a pandemic and a typhoon. We've increased by $200 million. So I guess I wanted to ask, my first question is again, can you please tell us, BPT, your estimates, and first confirm if the July excess revenue that you're projecting is, did I hear that correctly, to be $28 million?
Anyone specific can answer that in the panel? Art, are you willing to answer that?
Are you referring to the figures in the June CRER?
No, so we have the June says 34, and I thought I heard earlier someone said, maybe Mr. Burns said, but we know July might be $28 million. Do we know what July might look like?
It wasn't me, Speaker, but based on your request, I asked my staff to prepare the report, and it should be available tomorrow. Okay.
Do you have an idea of what that number is?
Well, the preliminary number that we have, and again, this is unofficial until such time that we transmit the report on the 20th. For the June CRER, we were showing a figure of 17.19 million, and the preliminary number for July is 18.5 million.
Okay, it's 17. All right, where's that at? I'm seeing the 34. Is it?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just. Let me clarify. That's the
for the
tracking
month?
over the adopted.
For the 1 month.
Yeah.
What about overall?
Okay, so our tracking for BPT as of the June CRER is 353.6 million, and currently we're looking at 355 million. This is for the year. So in other words, from the June report to the July report, we're going from 353 up to 355. So basically an increase, we're looking at a projected increase of about 2 million.
Okay, so you're expecting the overall excess revenues that we have received to be higher than what we're seeing for June?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, then I got that wrong earlier. I thought I heard another amount. Okay, so the BPT, and I just want to know, I thought last year's estimate was based large part because we had ARP spending and funds. So do you believe that the conditions are equivalent to FY23, that we will continue to see these increases? Because this is only again for 10% of companies on Guam that are paying this, right?
Yes, Senator. You know, going back to FY23, when we were preparing the FY23, we had the same concerns about whether or not how long the current condition will sustain the economy going forward. We had our reservations, we had our doubts, but still, we were still comfortable with the level that we actually estimated for FY23. As it's showing now, we are showing actually a 10.7 million, hopefully by the end of the fiscal year, to surplus above what we estimated. So again, using that same data, the same model, the same logic, you know, nothing really has changed in terms of the economy other than just maintaining. We would think, and we felt that the BBT will slightly grow, you know. If you're looking at, you know, the 20 million, 30 million, that's kind of like minute, maybe 10, 20% of the total over 1 year. If you look, we're talking about 350 million. So, you know, an increase of about 20 million is kind of like, you know, it's not, I mean, it would be normal if you look at the trend over the last couple of years. And like you mentioned earlier, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've grown this government by $200 million. So that in itself is telling you that there is room for us to grow even if the economy slows down. We're not growing exponentially over the last 3 or 5 years. I think, yeah, $200 million is a lot of money, but the bulk of that increase is coming from BBT.
Right, but is it sustainable without the ARP funds?
You know, again, the ARP funds, we're talking about $500 million, 500 some million that Guam received. We have approximately about a little over 200 million left to spend over the next year, 2 years. And we hope that by the time, you know, the deadline to spend this money will allow us some time to, again, help the economy sustain itself to where we are today. So I truly believe that, you know, we're talking about just basically the general fund having over $200 million. DOE also has a lot of, you know, ARP funds still pending. So I can safely say, at least at this point, I feel comfortable that it will sustain itself. All
right. Mr. Byrne, you agree?
Yes, generally I agree with Mr. Guerrero.
All right. Could you tell me whether the rainy day fund for FY22, there was a certain amount set aside, does that still exist?
It was 28 million, and yes, it does.
And what about the FY23 amount that's supposed to be set aside? So that balance also still exists?
Yes.
What's that?
So in total, we've got about 36 million.
Okay. At the, you said yesterday something about OPA is not in the budget, or maybe that was you, OFB. So does the total general fund available for appropriation amount, is that before or after OPA's taking accounted for?
It's before we take that. It's before, Senator.
Okay. So OPA will be shown later on in the budget. there's nothing that's hidden here. Okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure that was not clear yesterday.
No,
Okay.
they will be shown in the budget.
All right. And then can you explain the mental health fund? It looks like it's not tracking what we are predicting here. I don't know if I'm correct, or if you could just explain that one. It's AA. FY23 was 400,000. This year you're giving 346,000, but isn't it tracking like 85 million? Or am I wrong?
Yes, Senator, the amount of 85,000 basically is what's being tracked by BBMR. But information that we receive from the agencies directly from them, their collection is actually up to about 346,000.
Okay.
And that is the same amount that's reflected in the executive budget.
Right. Okay. So they're not tracking higher than that? Like in the millions? No? Okay.
I would hope they will, but
I know.
realistically, I don't think so.
All right. The tax refunds, when we set it aside for this fiscal year for FY23, it sounds from the Director of Revenue and Taxation that we are going to use less than that amount. What happens to the balance? Is that just excess general funds?
As the Director explained, there are really two elements to the tax refunds. One is the local amount of money that's expended, and the other is the federal amount of money. Mm-hmm. If we don't expend the federal amount of money, then since it's dedicated to each year, that we expect the federal government to take that back. The local amount would fall back into the general fund.
All right. So, but is it usable?
Yes.
How is that? Because it's appropriated, but it's usable without any transfer?
Well, it's usable. I mean, how you determine to use it is up to the legislature, but it's usable because it's available.
So what would that amount be expected for FY23?
For FY23, as I mentioned yesterday, as of August 1, we've paid out about $152,478,395 in refunds. And then we have received a total of, the portion of that is
Local
funds is about 50, it's about 35% of it. 35%, so it's about 53 million. So of the 152,478,394.54, about 53 million is general fund monies. That's what we have calculated based on what we see as the breakdown of the refunds by EITC, CTC, rebate recovery credits. So that's 53 million.
Okay. Do you have an estimate for the next 2 months or not yet?
So and again, as I mentioned, I believe that where we will be is we'll probably be in the $160 million range in refunds by the time we get to the end of this fiscal year. And I do believe that the 35% in terms of what the breakdown or the breakdown between local and federal funds are, that the 35% local funds will likely be consistent because we're not expecting to see a whole lot more refunds. So we're at 53 million again with 2 months left to go. If we hit about $160 million in refunds, that would bring us to almost 56 million. But again, it's difficult to say where we'll exactly be. And of course, the 35% is an approximation, but it's about $56 million is where we're projected to be by the end of this fiscal year.
All right, thank you. Is BBMR aware of any flooding projects that will need federal or local match that we can avail of that are not funded anywhere? Like we should anticipate?
No, I'm off the top of my head, I don't recall.
Could I ask, the executive order for the Typhoon Mawar says it will last for 90 days. When do you expect that to, 90 days past a certain event, 90 days following the determination of need for emergency procurement. She says, maybe extend it an additional 60 days. Is this still going on?
Emergency procurement is still going on, yes.
All right. So, do you have any projection how much you expect more to incur under that 50 million authority?
Not really close enough to the details to be able to tell you that number, but like I said, I still see it going on, and I still see a fair amount of activity associated with the recovery.
All right. Are there claims that are still going to come in that you haven't received yet? Or, I don't know, they call them tickets, D-land tickets, or things like that?
Again, I'm not sure about the D-land tickets. I know there's a backlog of them yet to be addressed.
Yes. Are you but you're allowing them to continue to submit?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there any interest on our rainy day fund being accumulated? It's supposed to be.
Yes.
All right.
Well,
is that accounted for here? Or it's just accounted for in the balance, you're saying,
yes,
of the rainy day fund?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So those numbers you gave me are principal plus interest, or whatever's in there?
Yes, basically,
okay.
Yes.
Are there any outstanding prior year vendor payables?
Well, as you know, because you receive the submissions from agencies kind of every week, or certainly every month, we do get submissions from agencies, but nothing has been really substantial. I mean, most of them now seem to be less than 5,000 when they're submitted.
All right, and the obligation of refunds is pretty much cleared up, right? And we're current?
Right, for those that are A status, we have processed, yes, up to current.
But what about the outstanding, not A status?
If they're not A status, of course, then those...
I'm talking about prior years or those... Those
are still included, if you'll also notice in the refund liability report that we do provide to the legislature. Mm-hmm. If there is outstanding that is not to be paid, that's indicated there. But those are not significant, ma'am.
Okay. So, how would you describe our deficit currently, Mr. Byrne?
I'm kind of proud to say we don't have a deficit.
Okay.
It's a much more comfortable position to be in because we can address current year fully in the current year.
Okay, great. Do you And Mr. Chair, can I clarify, if the panel is not going to be here after chapter 1 of the bill, we need to ask all our questions regarding those other chapters right now? For example, I want to ask them, is the claims amount, they take care of claims under DOA, it's under the DOA section. Are the government claims amount sufficient for expected government claims? I think it's only 75,000.
I've not, from memory, I've not received a government claim from DOA. Yes, we do report. Sorry, I thought you meant DOE. No, DOA, we sent a quarterly report, and we have enough funding at the moment.
Okay, to cover the outstanding claims expected in FY24.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't think I have any more questions right now, Mr. Chair. My questions are really on these special funds, but actually, since I still have time, I'm going to look one more time. Just 1 second. Oh, no. What are you, sorry. Mental health. All right, can we talk about this Chamorro Land Trust? The two special funds for the Chamorro Land Trust. So one's the Operations Fund, the other one is the Trust Survey Fund. So the Operations Fund, it looks like OFB's proposals is 758. The governor's proposal was 560. Both of these are below last year. But are you tracking? On one document I'm looking at, the tracking is 235,000 versus the 758 that is that correct? I got this from the CRER.
The OFB will answer that.
Yes, Senator, just give me a minute. I'll go back
Sure,
and look at the prior
sure.
year.
Oh. Mr. Chair, can I ask you, maybe, or anyone, this does not show anything for Simon Sanchez High School. Does that mean that there was no money set aside?
I'd ask the OFB to respond to that, so we can figure that one, because I understood that we did set it aside.
I mean, as debt service, so is that in another part? It's in the education chapter? Okay.
It's in the chapter? Okay. When we
That's
get
an
to
outright appropriation, so it's not a debt service.
It's an appropriation made directly to GDOC.
Okay.
They pay it other than putting it under the debt service.
All right. Anticipated debt service, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what about the new prison? It doesn't show as a debt service either. I thought we had set that aside in previous, was that only EITC funds?
Yeah, Senator, the reason why DOC, or actually the construction of the prison, isn't reflected because there's nothing happening with the project right now. There haven't been a loan, there's no bond, nothing has happened with the project. So it was difficult for me to put anything into the budget knowing that there's no obligation to be paid because there's no contract, no movement on the project.
All right, I thought that we had authorized to set it aside though for that, like to be accumulating, but no? Okay.
As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, when we did appropriate that money and identify it, it was on DOC to go to GIDA and start the bond and go out. They haven't done anything. So that's why we're not putting money aside to pay for something that we have no reason to pay. Once they get to the bond, then we'll be able to identify that funds.
Okay.
All right, OB, you got the answer for the Chamorro Land Trust?
Yes, going back and looking as far back as 2017, it seems that the fund balance is somewhat erratic over the years. I don't know if it's a reporting But in FY 2017, the total collection on the Chamorland Trust Operation Fund yielded $460,000 plus dollars. In 2018, they only recorded $24,000. In 2019, they recorded only $7,000. But then in 2020, they collected $1.8 million. What happened? Then in 2021, dropped down to about $794,000. In FY22, it's down to $521,000. So what we did is we kind of like just took a 3-year average of the most recent collections, and that's how we came up with the amount that's showing
All right, what are you tracking for 23?
for 23. Yeah, BBMR is tracking 892,000. 892,000.
All right, is that on one of these sheets that you gave us? Can you just, because I looked on the CRER, that doesn't match what they're tracking on the CRER.
Okay, the CRER, yeah, remember it's general fund, but the amount that we're showing here is our tracking.
All right, could I ask you, Mr. Mariano, am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, the tracking for the COTC fund isn't in the CRER per se, it's in the special fund.
Right, the special
report.
funds.
Yeah, and it's, the numbers are actually behind the summary tracking for the 8 primary funds. There are details for all the other special funds
Right.
that are.
So what is your amount? 235?
Yeah, according to, this is the June report. According to the June report, it's 725,000.
How much?
725?
Oh, 725 cumulative? Oh, okay. All right then. Okay, then this is good. We talked about the customs, and so the rest of these I think are okay, Mr. Chair. Is there a big change in this, the E911 and the, what's the other one? Fire, Life, and Medical Emergency Fund? Well, it's status quo, but versus the tracking. Or is that close to what you're tracking?
Yes, Senator, we use the average of what the tracking was over the last 3 years, and it is somewhat close, almost
Okay.
the same.
All right, and then the Environmental Health Fund?
Yeah, using the 3-year average tracking, we agree with the number that is in the executive budget.
All right, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Barnett, do you have any questions for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Byrne, are there any plans to conduct an attorney pay plan study?
In due course, yes.
So I remember when we were entertaining the general pay plan raises, and I think it might have been you who had cautioned against giving some of the pay plan an increase, but not the entire pay plan. Would that, if we were to give certain attorneys in the attorney pay plan an increase, but not all of them, what would the result of that be? What are the possible risks?
It's really hard for me to evaluate the risk that might be engendered by attorneys, one might think that the risk might be greater than for other people. But it doesn't seem to be quite fair.
Right. So would you, in your wisdom, advise that we conduct a study of all the attorney pay on the island from agency to agency and then adjust accordingly, like we did with the GPP?
I think that would be the way to do it.
Are we able to find out maybe like a snapshot or any type of intermediate report about lapse funds by agency? I don't know who could answer that.
Are you referring to FY23 lapses?
Yeah, I know. If do you have any intermediate numbers?
No, not at this point in time. And typically what happens is towards the end of the year, you know, there are going to be some departments or agencies that are falling short based on their appropriation level. So that's when we would use the governor's transfer authority to cover those shortfalls. And so, yeah, it's too premature to say which department is lapsing, you know, come 9/30, because we still need some time after the fiscal year ends to make that assessment.
Are we able to say if this new Government of Guam self-insurance is included in this budget proposal? I'm not sure if that had been asked.
What was the question?
The self-insurance Government of Guam?
I don't think that's on the revenue projection or any expenditure. Steve, maybe you can answer it. Obi?
Senator, my understanding is it's not a finalized kind of thing for us to appropriate any money at this time. I do not know the numbers. I don't know what the effects, what the impact is going to have doing the self-insured. The only thing I know is that right now there is funding in the appropriation to take care of the medical, health, life, dental for the retirees, plus the employees' contribution of their basic plan is also reflected in each department's staffing pattern. So those are the fundings, those are the monies that I think are already or should be appropriated for any type of insurance costs right now.
Thank you, Steve. Section 30 funds, I wanted to ask, when these Section 30 funds come to Guam, are they kept in like a special account or are they commingled with other funds?
Mr. Burns, would you like to?
The amount that's used to pay debt service is immediately taken off the top by the trustee of the bank. Then the rest of it is available, because it's part of the general fund, it's commingled.
So if there were excess Section 30 revenues, for example, from like a FY22, would those be listed just generally as excess or Section 30?
Excess, you mean we get more than Mr. Guerrero's estimate?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you'd see it on the CRER as an excess revenue.
For OFB, how do you calculate the shortfalls in the special funds?
The way we calculate the shortfall in the special funds basically is, one, we look at the appropriations that were done in the prior years, and we kind of like take the trend of what we're normally used to seeing. Then if the current trend shows anything other than the normal, or what we're used to seeing, then we make the adjustments accordingly. If we need to reduce the special funds that fund special projects, special programs, special departments and agencies, normally we offset that through the general fund. Case in point, custom and quarantine. If custom and quarantine fund does not collect up to the part of we feel that is sufficient to cover their operations, of course we would have to come up with a general fund to cover the difference or their remaining requirements.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Byrne, now that we're on the expenditures, and I can ask about the expenditures, are you able to tell us how much of the $20 million from GDOE has been spent?
I wasn't aware that we were on expenditures, but I think Mr. Mariano answered the question when he was speaking about the typhoon funds, that the 20 million is in the typhoon funds.
So there's no way to tell how much of it's left? Or could you tell me what job orders are pending for that money?
No,
Anybody?
I couldn't. If you look at the report, there's expenditures and there's encumbrances in there.
This one.
In there.
Yeah.
And 20 million of it, 20 million of the 28 million is that 20 million.
Was there any record of that, what do you call it, recalling of the 20 million? Snatching?
Well, no, because it wasn't snatched. It was allocated, and that was debated and discussed when we discussed the general fund appropriation.
Ms. Daff, I wanted to ask, the increased revenues that we're seeing, of course, largely due to more BPT, and then, of course, the Better Public Service Fund, you guys get 10% of that. Are you going to get this extra Better Public Service Fund revenue? And if you do, how do you plan to use it to collect more taxes?
With regards to the Better Public Service Fund, so I believe with regards to DRT, there is a section of the Budget Act that actually, or the budget bill that deals with DRT, and DRT was given a specific amount. It's like just shy of 17 million, I believe. And so how we have operated, based on my understanding, is we operate based on that amount that's provided to us, whether no matter what sources the funds come from. And we do utilize, we do on an ongoing basis have our collections branch that works toward collecting outstanding taxes. We also have collections as part of our tax enforcement division. There is our criminal investigation branch and our examination branch. And again, they're all involved in that process in terms of examining, working to collect taxes. But also our income tax branch as well does send out notices when there are, for certain instances where there perhaps, and I know earlier there was talk about W-2s, if it is found that there are W-2s that are not being reported by organizations, but we're seeing refunds for those or claims for those for people who file returns, we also send notices for that. So, again, collections is an ongoing effort. We're working to embark on this special project, which should be done annually, but we haven't done since prior to COVID. And in September, we're expecting to send out our annual notices, and we're very hopeful that will help to bring in some more monies into our general fund.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Byrne, can you, if you don't mind, or anybody actually, can you tell us what the expected Medicare match for FY24 is? And then training funds.
Senator, do you mean Medicaid?
Thank you.
Says 22.2 million.
Thank you. What about the, Mr. Byrne, law enforcement recruit training cycles for the next fiscal year? Can you tell us what's in store?
Yes. We're going through each of the law enforcement agencies, making sure that the recruitment and promotions are properly scheduled and panned out. We had a kind of big clash together of DOC and the fire department who wanted to do it at the same time, which really did strain the resources at DOAHR. But we're getting through that, and then we're going to move on to GPD and customs.
I know that we've had a little back and forth this year about delays and recruitment, and especially with Department of Corrections. So I just wanted to ask, like, the budget that you guys have proposed, does that give you the tools that you need to address any type of backlog in any of these areas where we've seen difficulty?
Yes, we actually, in the budget and in our manning, we propose to employ an additional 4 people in the HR department.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
Yes. In our manning plans, we are planning, in fact, we're in the process of employing four new employees, senior employees in the HR department.
And so was that the nature of the backlog? Was that you had like one person working on these things?
It wasn't one person, it was actually about 3 people, but the effort demands more. And you know, in the course of a day, those 3 people may have to deal with other issues that takes away their concentration from recruitment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett. Senator Parkinson, do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone, again. So, in 2020, the Office of Public Accountability released a report on use taxes for air cargo and found significant revenue leakage and processes that were outdated, counterproductive, and lacked transparency and accountability. The OPA listed 12 recommendations to close these gaps in collections on July 7th of this year, and I wrote a letter to Customs, DOA, and DRT regarding their progress on those 12 recommendations. Subsequently, on July 20th, I met with Customs and DRT in my office regarding their progress on use tax collection. They reported significant progress and movement towards better collection on use tax. This question is for DRT Director Daphne Shimizu. For the benefit of the rest of my colleagues here, can you describe what has been done since the OPA audit to improve the use tax collections?
With regards to use tax, I want to maybe I could just share some of the challenges that we have with use tax, and which have been brought up even in 2019 when I just started in this position. So there are multiple issues with use tax, to include the exemptions, to include, of course, the process by which Customs collects the use tax, which by law Customs is required to collect the use tax, at some point, so what the process basically is that the use tax form, the Form UST, is filled out, and that those forms, Customs is required to collect the use tax. However, there are different points of entry into Guam for items that are subject to use tax. There's the airport, and then there's also the U.S. Postal Service, and then there's the port. And of course, there are challenges with collecting use tax when it comes through air cargo, because there, as I understand it, as per Customs, there was a federal lawsuit or a federal judgment that that prevents the ability, or that prevents Customs from stopping any products from coming in, or stopping products from being delivered to the people who purchase them because of the federal, again, for the purpose of getting the tax. So what we have been really working on, and I think focusing on, Customs has been working with BSP, and they have been including us in, is an effort to move toward, and we mentioned it earlier, the purchase of a system that's going to assist with managing the cargo that comes into Guam, and helping Customs to be able to manage the items in reference to not only use tax, but which will help with use tax. And just to share, back in even 2020, I had met with Customs Director in CNMI, and how CNMI, and again, CNMI is a little bit of a smaller jurisdiction, but how it works there, there is a bit of a closer relationship between Customs and Rev and Tax there. And so Customs agents there are actually within the collections area and are able to access the tax system, and that's actually the usual relationship between customs and DRT in other jurisdictions. That is not the case in Guam. And what happens in CNMI is that when a shipment is coming in, the customs team will receive a bill of lading, and then the individual or company that is going to pay the use tax, or they call it excise tax there, goes to the customs window. There is no paper at all involved. There's no Form UST. It's a paperless process. They go in, we pull up, if it's you, Senator Parkinson, they pull up your name, Senator Parkinson. They could not just see the amount of tax that's going to be due for that particular item, they would also see if there's any outstanding taxes that are due, so that way they make sure that they can collect on those or work with you or whoever the shipper is to make sure that those are addressed. And so that's not the case with Guam. With Guam, it's a purely paper process. And we have met with customs with regards to the various challenges that we have regarding the system. For example, issues with not proper social security number being put on a form, which causes an issue because it's difficult for us. We are actually the billers, I guess, if you may call it that, for use tax. Because when customs, when items come in through our ports and the use tax is paid or not paid, we get Forms UST. And what we do is we enter those into our system so we can bill taxpayers and collect on those monies. And the same branch that deals with the federal military contractors, that deals with tobacco bonding, warehouses, that deals with BPT, also deals with the issue of use tax and collecting on use tax. So I believe that, as per our team's discussion with me, and also I believe with your team or with your office and you, and thank you as well for meeting with our team on this, we believe that our effort really needs to be focused on the system and focused on trying to get this system, which is a system that's probably in use in most jurisdictions throughout the world, but just happens not to be yet in use by Guam. And we have been, we actually DRT Guam, and I believe you also met with some people from Vanuatu. There are people from other island nations who are assisting us with this effort. And we believe that when the system is put into place and there's proper, it's not a manual system that's subject to, many different issues that you have when, with issues with names being incomplete, social security numbers not being entered into the system, items even maybe perhaps not properly being entered or into a form. I think that will help to reduce those issues, and we believe that will be helpful. Again, so our efforts are focused on that, and we believe that that is actually going to be useful. This is an effort, though, that BSP with Customs has been working on for a little bit. It's my understanding that they expect the system to be able to be put into use in the next year to 18 months, so 12 to 18 months, which we believe is, again, going to help us in many areas. We talk about, the increase in construction. We talk about also increase in retail and other areas. And so not only this will be helpful for the purpose of use tax, we believe also it will be helpful, as you saw, there's reports that will be able to tell us what kind of products are being brought into Guam, what we can expect in terms of maybe taxes on even tobacco and other items, right, which again has been a huge concern for the legislature. So really that's where our focus has been. Again, the same issues that we run into with regards to use tax are the similar issues that we have continue to see, and until there is an improvement in our system, we believe that, and also I believe that there are issues that have to be addressed with regards to, again, to the exemption. The $1,000 per month exemption up to $5,000 a year is very difficult to track when people have multiple items coming in from multiple sources. The issue of trying to penalize if there is a social security number issue, and again, these are, although Customs, again, by law is required to collect the tax, really it falls on Rev Tax to bill, to reconcile, to make sure that we collect those monies. And so it is very challenging. So we're looking forward to that, and we believe that that is where the focus needs to be.
Thank you, Director Shimizu. In FY2023, we projected $3,992,879 in use tax collections. And according to the CRER, we are tracking $10,435,239 in use taxes for this year. So I want to thank DRT DOA and Customs for their continued diligence on use tax collections and adherence to the recommendations of the OPA audit. Is it safe to say that these improvements in use tax collections are due to improvements we have made in the process and will continue to improve, including, as you say, as we adopt this electronic customs declaration system?
Well, I know there have been some senators who have even reached out to us with regards to people receiving notices regarding use tax. So again, we're just in every area, we're just doing our best to move forward with making sure we collect. But we also, our team has actually met with Customs multiple times. Customs has been very, our teams have developed pretty good relationships, a rapport with Customs, and so we're regularly talk when there is an issue either way. Customs has a question or we do. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but definitely, you know, we've done our best to put efforts into making sure we collect.
Okay. Is there any reason to believe that use taxes would make a significant decline in collections compared to what we're collecting this year?
At this point, what we're seeing is, you know, in the years when we were in COVID, what we saw, even with items that we were purchasing within our agency, for example, license plates, we saw because of supply chain issues throughout the nation and the world that there was delays in shipment in many areas. We're seeing that not be as much of a problem. Also, because of the efforts of Typhoon Mawar, we did see quite a few different items, larger items, construction items coming in, bucket trucks from other areas, other kinds of equipment coming in, and goods coming in, generators, et cetera, coming in to, you know, of course, because of the recovery efforts. And I believe that as we continue to move forward with more increase in construction because of the military, the plans in place with regards to the buildup, that will likely continue to see an increase in use tax again. And again, of course, that is all related to what I believe Senator Blas brought up earlier, which is the capacity for construction in Guam and our construction companies to address that. But I believe that use tax will definitely continue to see, again, more items being brought into Guam, and there is no exemption for construction equipment brought into Guam. So if a big piece of equipment is brought into Guam, unless it's for resale, that item needs to be, you know, use tax will be applied to that.
Okay. So I'm understanding you correctly when you say that you think that the use tax will continue to improve as the years go on, and this is not like a one-year fluke.
Absolutely, and I believe that especially after a year or a year and a half from now, when Customs is able to implement the harmonized system, that we'll definitely continue to see more enhancements and improvements in that and in analysis of the data.
Okay. The proposed budget in front of us projects $6,701,360 in use taxes. For my colleagues, that is page 3, line 8, and is labeled as other taxes under business privilege tax. Steve, you said that you took an average of the last 3 years in use tax collections to arrive at this number. Is that correct?
For the most part, yes, Senator.
Okay. But in this current year, we are projected to collect $10,435,239. And I think based on testimony today, the increase is due to the progress made by DRT, Customs since the OPA audit. Do you think projecting a flat 0% growth of use tax and projecting the same amount we are anticipating to collect this year, do you think that is still a conservative projection?
First of all, Senator, it's not a flat projection because if you go back to FY21, the audit, that amount is $4.5 million. If you go to FY22, the CER rate right now at the end of the year is 5.1. You're correct. What we're tracking for FY23 is 10.4. So we took an average of those 3 years, still very conservative amount, and that's how we came up with the 6.7. I agree that, you know, hopefully that what we're seeing in FY23 would be the foundation and a stable flow for the years to come. But I just can't take the 10.7 and use that for next year, considering that there's always things that possibly could happen. We don't know about it or know about things that may happen. So, you know, you just want to be a little conservative. But it is an increase over what we collected last year.
Okay. According to the latest CRER, we are tracking to collect $353.7 million in business privilege tax this year. Yet the projection for FY 2024 BPT collection in this budget bill is $350.8 million, about a $3 million decrease. You are projecting about a 1% decrease in the BPT. Why is that?
For the BPT, Senator, over the last 3 years, we have, like I said earlier, I mentioned it, that we've actually grown specifically in the BPT category in revenues for Governor Guam. So based on that tracking alone, within the last 3 years, I feel comfortable that this amount that we're projecting, 350, is something sustainable that we can achieve in FY24 using historical data and know what's going to happen in the future, or at least not knowing what's going to happen.
Okay. 3 million in less than BPT means about 60 to 100 million less in gross receipts and economic activity year over year. Where do you expect this loss to occur?
Can you repeat your question again?
$3 million less in BPT means we are going to be receiving 60 to $100 million less in gross receipts and economic activity over the year. In what sectors do you expect this loss to occur? Like, is this a problem of the tourism? Like, where are we losing this 60 to $100 million where we're losing $3 million in the BPT?
Again, Senator, the amount that we're projecting up to 350 million is a conservative amount. As far as any particular areas of where we could potentially lose this money is really, it's something that we hope will not happen. It could be a natural disaster. We might lose again tourism coming to Guam. So what we're projecting for next year, hopefully, like I said, about 600, 700,000 tourists. GVP is anticipating 1 million tourists. Again, it's a number that we're projecting that can be attained. I don't know exactly where we can identify a loss. That loss can come from anywhere. It's just something that we feel is reasonable and can be attained going forward.
Okay. You've projected an increase in corporate income tax. How can corporate income tax increase while you're projecting business privilege tax to decrease?
Again, Senator, we're going to go back again to the tracking, okay? And I will point out that in FY21, we collected 108 million in corporate tax. In FY22, it dropped down to 86. And in FY23, we are tracking at 109. So you take the average of that, and that's the number we normally use, again, to come up with our number. Remember, corporate taxes is something, too, that I believe is what businesses pay. And I am assuming that this trend will at least continue because of the economic growth that we're seeing. There's new businesses coming on, down, all those kind of companies are coming on. So I honestly think that there would be an increase going forward.
Okay, that's fair. And so you have this projection for the corporate income tax at 1%. Mm-hmm. Would projecting a 1% increase in the business privilege tax instead of a 1% decrease still be a conservative projection in your opinion?
Based on the tracking, yes, Senator.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Senator Dueñas, do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Sijus Masi. This is for OFB, BBMR, and DOA. Do you agree that the $20 million appropriated Department of Education under 37005 was done by public law?
I'll be the first one to answer. In my interpretation, yes, it was done by public law.
I have to ask this question because the next 4 questions I have is important to have this established. Gentlemen?
There was a law that included it, yeah.
Art?
Yes, it was by a public law, yes.
Okay. I need to draw your attention to when our esteemed public auditor and a fine jurist at that was in this very house. He made it abundantly clear that any public law that's passed by this or any legislature in any session, unless duly repealed, is a public law. And I'm going to pull it up so that in case you have something different than what I have. In the public law creating the $50 million, is there any verbiage in there whatsoever that explicitly repeals 3705?
To my knowledge, Senator, no.
Mr. Byrne?
Explicitly, no.
Art?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. So let me be clear. This public law has not been repealed. This proposal that has been purportedly agreed upon between the BBMR director and the last acting superintendent is a verbal discussion. There is no paperwork. There is no paper trail. There is no recognition of an allocation taking the $20 million from Department of Education for the purposes of MOAR and the $50 million authorized. The only thing it says is general fund. Mr. Byrne, and I'm so glad, Art, that you also mentioned earlier that when we realize the now 90% reimbursement rate from our expenditures due to MOAR, it will be a reimbursement, not a windfall to the government of Guam. Art, that would also be recorded, correct, in fiscal year 2023?
It will be recorded when we, like any other accounting entry, it will be recorded when it's capable of being foreseen.
But the reference would be 2023 because it was 2023 funds that you used in order to be able to use the expenditure.
If we receive it in fiscal 24, it will be recorded in fiscal 24. If we receive it in fiscal 25, it will be recorded in fiscal 25.
Good enough. All the more better then, because in coming up is going to be an amendment. You know, it seems, and I'm very disappointed, and I'm not going to blame you, Ed. I know where the instructions come from. I'm not going to blame anybody on this panel. But it seems like there's hell-bent on not allowing Department of Education to have this $20 million. And it's disconcerting, to say the least. The hoops that we're going through when the Department of Education continues to expressly state, notwithstanding your discussion, Mr. Byrne, that they have a lot of federal funds, but federal funds that are allocated nonetheless. They have made it clear on the record not less than 4 or 5 times, either in this session hall or in public hearing room, that they've only been able to reprogram $90 million of ARP for repairs and maintenance. We know that it was $100 million since 2019 of deferred maintenance that's been accumulated, and factoring in inflation and all the other costs to current day, that $20 million is necessary to accomplish the mission. I have to establish this because it's part of the revenue, but I want to make it clear though that if this is a public law that is duly to be funded, this is not new money. It should not affect general fund revenues for 2024, correct?
As I explained, Senator, the DOE is part of the general fund. So the revenues are part of the general fund, the expenditures are part of the general fund.
Good enough. But it's an expenditure recognized in 2024 or 2023 because it's a public law that was passed in 2023.
You're talking of the way that the appropriation is recorded.
Sure. But I'm talking about also that if you identify a carryover, like we've done many years before, of lapses or any other expenditure available for appropriation, it does not change the fact that the appropriation for that year is such fund, but it allows for expenditures on lapsed funds, correct?
That depends upon the way the law is written.
Mr. Byrne, you've been a part of a number of different budgets. I think you clearly understand what a carry forward is.
Yes, but as I say, it depends when the law is written. Unless there's a continuing appropriation, it will lapse.
Right. So if there's a continuing appropriation that's part of a budget, it doesn't affect that budget year's appropriation because it's from the prior year.
Yes, but thank you for bringing this up, Senator, because I want to be really clear that when we prepare the financial statements, right, we record an expenditure when it's expended. On a budgetary basis, which is what you're talking about, you record an expenditure when it's encumbered. So there's always a difference between the two. So I'm not really sure which one of the two that you're looking at, but I want to make sure that in your mind you understand there's a difference, and a lapse occurs on a budgetary basis, not on an accounting basis.
No, I understand that. I understand that. But what I also do understand is that appropriation is not dead, and it's recorded in the year that it was issued. Otherwise, you could just decide to not fund any entity that's duly been given their budget in law and say, sorry, Charlie, the clock ran out on you.
Well, that used to be the case in the past when,
well, it
when
shouldn't
the funds,
be the case ever again.
When the funds weren't available, that the appropriation just lapsed.
Well, okay, then we'll go back to OFB. The whole purpose of the optimism in this budget is because of the fact that we're tracking far beyond, as you've stated, after both of these public laws have been passed. Is that correct? You're saying up to 30 some odd million by the time on top of what we've currently accumulated by the end of this fiscal year, correct? Steve?
The $33 million that I'm referring to in the FY24 budget is the amount that I am saying after OEB is the amount over the governor's request of $65 million. Combined, that total is $99 million of what we feel would be sufficient enough to be generated in FY24. Has nothing to do with FY23. But to get to the $99 million, we did use data that is occurring in FY23 and prior years to come up with the number we feel is adequate and attainable for FY24, Senator.
That's correct. And the CRER subsequent to these appropriations have stated that and as part of your research, correct?
Based on their tracking, yes.
Yeah. I just, no more excuses. We'll see what the body decides. I hope there's enough senators that are just as hell-bent on giving this DOE money to them than there are that from the administration's hell-bent on not giving it to them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Frank Blas, Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Byrne, there was an earlier presentation of there could be an anticipated shortfall in the special funds. Am I correct?
It's a possibility, Senator, yes.
What do we anticipate that shortfall to amount to?
I think in answer to an earlier question, I said that it was a bit hard to determine, but it could be between 6 to 8 million.
Okay. Do you have a specific areas as to where these shortfalls may be?
Well, if I could refer you to the Special Revenue Fund Tracking Report, you can see the two main funds that have the issue are the Highway Fund, but that was we fixed that by transferring some money already from the general fund into that fund. So we anticipated that problem because of the gas tax holiday. So that one's been fixed. The Healthy Futures Fund is short by 6.9 million, and that may grow, and there's a couple of smaller ones, which is why I said between 6 and 8 million.
Okay, so the highway fund was as a result of the gas tax holiday, right?
Yes, sir.
And the Healthy Futures Fund, I'll find that. Here it says 33,032,269. It's going to be short by how much? Anticipation?
I'm looking, it's easy reference if you go to attachment A. It shows a revised shortage of 6.9 million.
How much? I'm sorry?
6.9 million?
6.9. What do you, why the shortage? What do you surmise as to why that shortage exists?
I think it was said earlier that it reflects a change in smoking habits from partly, this is certainly the tobacco take is down, a change in tobacco smoking habits from tobacco to vaping, which isn't taxed.
Okay. And what entity would primarily suffer, for lack of a better term, from this shortage in that pharmaceutical?
The two departments that get most benefit are public health and behavioral health.
Okay. And has there been a way to be able to fill that gap in the general? So have we increased general fund appropriation to fill that gap that existed in the special fund?
Yes, we have.
Okay, I know this is in advance, but I just want to make sure, because we're in the appropriations. Okay, so that's taking care of that area. I need to talk about self-insurance now, because there's a whole lot of, there's a conversation that is brewing within the community with a lot of questions about this. And you know, one of the things I looked at is Mr. Vern, is it then, can I assume that as the government of Guam is, intends to declare itself self-insured in health insurance, that the government of Guam then becomes the health insurance carrier, health insurance company?
It becomes responsible for paying out health insurance benefits. I don't think it would necessarily elevate it to be a health insurance carrier, because that would imply multiple clients, which isn't the case.
So how does that work? I mean, you already have a third-party administrator in one company, and then you declare in this area, you say to be self-insured. So when you say self-insured, it means I am insuring myself. So the government of Guam becomes now the insurance carrier.
Well, I'm just taking issue with the word carrier. It's responsible for the insurance, self-insurance. It's not really a carrier, because in my mind that implies that you service many different clients.
Well, then who does the servicing?
Well, I'm not sure I really follow
Well,
what
we've
you're
been
saying.
following your thought process of what the government of Guam's role is. What is the government of Guam's role then in this whole?
The government of Guam's role is to we're transferring the risk from a third-party carrier to the government of Guam.
Thank you. Which makes us then the insurer. We are the insurer.
Self-insured means you're the insurer and the insured.
Okay, so if you are the insurer, you're basically carrying your own risk, right?
We're assuming
Hence,
the risk.
you are the carrier, right?
We're not the carrier.
Well, you better check the statutes because that's how because then it goes to the next question that I have. I hate to put this question to you, Ms. Shimizu, but has Gov Guam enrolled, subscribed to be an insurer on Guam by local statute?
I'm not aware of that, Senator Blas.
There's 51 days left, and there's a timeline that there's a requirement by Guam statute for things to occur within 45 days before it's supposed to take into effect. I haven't even gotten to the meat of what my questioning is. My concern here now is if Gov Guam says we are self-insured, we are the insurer. Insurers on Guam are required there are specific laws, guidelines that need to be followed before you can take on that designation.
Our legal advice is there is no requirement for any entity, private or public, to be registered as an insurer to assume the insured risk.
I suggest then you look, at Division 2 of Title 22, the insurance laws of Guam. They're very specific with regards to health insurance. That said, though, is that in this process, as we understand it to be, is that the government of Guam would then be collecting the premiums, for lack of a better term, the employee and retiree share of health premiums. Am I correct?
The third-party administrator will be collecting the premium.
No, the third party is according to what you have provided, is they are the only, all the responsibility is doing is giving you the bill, taking the check from you and giving it to the provider. That's all their responsibility is. They're not the receivers of the funds. The government of Guam is the ones who are receivers of the funds.
I'm not sure what you're looking at. We had two proposals. One that we collected the funds. We had another proposal that they collect the funds because they maintain the subscriber listing, and therefore they know who should pay and who shouldn't pay. We haven't met yet with the third-party administrator.
Therein lies another concern that I have with something that's going to be rolled out in 51 days.
I was going to do that tomorrow, but since I anticipated being here, we moved it till next week.
Okay, well, because, this is because if that were to be the case, that Gov Guam collects the premiums and everything, and this is the revenue portion of the budget, I don't see where these premiums are going to be deposited, or what funds these premiums are going to be placed in.
Well, let me answer your question this way. As you know, we're already self-insured for dental insurance and pharmacy benefits.
Yes.
So the situation at the moment is that the insurance company collects the premiums and gives them to us to put into a fund.
That's not how I was interpreted, or how it was explained to me earlier, and by individuals who were having issue because the third-party administrator for at least in the area of the prescriptions was saying they were waiting for the check from the government of Guam to be able to pay.
Yes, we give them the check.
So who collect the premium?
Well, okay. We give them, the premiums come from the government and the employees, just like we give them a check under the old system.
Okay.
Right? We give them a check because at the moment, only partial self-insurance is in place. Therefore, we cannot keep the whole premium because it's only partial self-insurance. Now, moving forward, we could change that, if that's your wish, to keep the premium. But in practice, that wouldn't work under the current policy because only 2 elements of the 3 are self-insured.
I understand that, and you know, is unfortunately your presentation as to how the funds. Granted that I'm only talking about what can be germane to Chapter 1 here. The concern here is, okay, if we are the self-insured, the premiums go to us, but yet I don't see here any entry here of any fund or projected fund that will be collecting the premiums and how much we anticipate to be able to collect.
Well, that's a matter for OFB. But let me say from the very beginning, we didn't do this just to make your life or my life difficult. We went down this path, which is already incorporated in statute in section 4301 of 4
I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to argue the point that you have the ability to be able to do this.
In order to save money.
And I'm trying to figure out, first off, in order to save money, first, where are we putting the money?
And improve the benefits for government of Guam employees, their dependents, and retirees.
And I'm sure that when we get to that portion of the budget bill,
I don't disagree that perhaps it should be shown in here as a special fund, but I didn't prepare this, and I wasn't asked that question. It's a very good question, and I actually don't really disagree with you that it should be shown as a special fund in here, but it isn't. So maybe that's something that...
Well, and I appreciate that this conversation and your acknowledgement of this thing, Mr. Warren, because I have to agree with you, okay, for accounting purposes and everything, so that we understand where this money, you know, because, you know, my fear here is that if there's not a fund that is created, an account that's created to be able to provide this, you know, the only other place that we put it is in that infamous general fund, okay? And God knows what happens when it goes in there.
I understand, but currently it isn't in the general fund.
Okay.
It's in a special fund, and it's captured in there.
Okay.
And
because
we have one special fund for the dental insurance and another special fund for the pharmacy insurance.
Is it my understanding, Mr. Byrne, that you were the, I guess, for lack of a better term, chairman of the negotiation for the health insurance?
Yes, that was my unfortunate role.
Okay, yeah. All right. And do we have loss history? Is there a way that we have been be able to determine what our loss history is if we're going to be now the insurers? And I think that, you know, one of the things that we do in the insurance industry before we take on a new client or anything, one of the things that we want to look at is the history of losses that the client has had over the years. Is there?
Yes, sir. And that was used by our actuary to not only review the whole proposal for self-insurance policy, but also to set the contribution rates that's required in order to make sure that it's financially sound.
So based on the loss history, what have we anticipated as to what we're going to need to remain solvent?
Based on are you asking me what amount of money is going to go in the fund?
How much?
Well, the loss history that we've had to date is somewhere between, and it varies from year to year, I assume you're asking me the question for the whole 3 elements.
Yes.
Is somewhere between 90 and 100 million.
90 million.
90 to 100, 90 to 110 million.
What do we anticipate to get if the assumption is that we have all Guam employees and retirees join and enter into this program?
Well, in this one, it's broken out a little bit, but it's like 100 and, we think 100 and, somewhere 140 million?
140.
Yeah.
Okay. Because another thing too that I've noticed, and it's not in this, but we're going to have a discussion on this down the road, okay, is the administration of the program. Okay? Out of whose shop is this going to be administered? Who's going to do the adjudication? Who's going to be doing the adjustments on this? How much are we paying our TPA? Where's that contract money coming from?
It's coming from the 140 million.
Yeah. Okay. So of the $140 million, okay, if we have already about a $90 million loss history, 140 million, 50 million, okay, and that's going to be broken up between, I'm going to assume your agency and the TPA?
The bulk of it is the TPA.
The bulk of it is going to be the TPA. What plans do we have, what actions do we have with regard to if our premium or our payout ratio exceeds our loss ratio?
Well, I guess there's two things to say. The first thing is, as I mentioned, we had an actuary review the whole thing and set up the rates. And that actuary is actually the same actuary that performs the valuation of the pension fund. So that they understand Guam and they understand the need to be financially prudent. The governor's letter also permitted us to buy stop-loss insurance, which we're now engaged in doing.
Say that again?
Permitted us to buy stop-loss insurance, which I'm sure it's a term you're familiar with, which will enable us to offload exceptional losses in exchange for a premium for a reinsurer.
And that's going to be anticipated in this budget?
It's all anticipated in the rate.
Yeah, but I think that now we've created basically a new entity within the government of Guam. We created an insurance firm in the government of Guam.
Well, that's where I take issue with you.
Yeah,
we've created...
Somebody's got to administer this insurance program within the government of Guam.
We've created a new fund. We have like 82 special funds, and this is
and when we get to that portion of this budget where we can anticipate a discussion, because it should be a part of the discussion, if the intent is to roll this thing out the same time this budget becomes in effect, okay, there are very serious implications concerning this. So I'm going to hope that the administration does have the language necessary to be able to put so that we know what's going to contain. We're talking 51 days from now.
Yes, time passes quickly.
And you've got a 45-day deadline for other stuff that's necessary.
But I'm not sure what you want us to do in that 51 days.
What I'm saying is in 6 days, you are required by Guam law to be able to put out certain information. You're required by Guam law to have certain information approved to be rolled out. It's Guam law.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, you can check to the pretty lady to your right, okay? Okay. You have something to say, Daphne?
So I do have a question, Senator Blas, regarding self-insured entities. I am aware that self-insured entities are required to comply with certain requirements for reporting, for example, like Form 5500s, right, because it's a benefit. But would you, and I am not the Insurance and Banking Commissioner, but I am looking for, in Title 22, I was looking at I couldn't find the definition section in Title 22, but would you point to the section which talks to or speaks to self-funded?
22 GCA, Chapter 18, Section 18308.1, Form Approval, Health Insurance. A, no health insurance policy or endorsement shall be delivered or issued for delivery in Guam unless the policy or endorsement form is filed for approval with the Commissioner at least 45 days prior to its effective date. Okay? Within 45, subsection C, within 45 days after filing of any health insurance policy form or endorsement requiring approval pursuant to this section, the Commissioner will indicate approval by signing or giving explanation for this approval in writing. Okay? And it goes on. If you continue down, if we go to rates, Article 5, Section 18501, approval, all rates, rate schedules, rate plans, and methods of computing rates to be applied to any insurance transacted in Guam shall be filed with the Office of the Commissioner. Before any rates may be charged, advertised, publicized, or otherwise represented, they shall have the approval of the Commissioner. Did we already jump through those hoops?
And I do have a question, and I'm not familiar with prior years, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to kind of raise some issues or items, because I believe there have been some years where we've been pretty close to, and correct me if I'm wrong, like pretty close to the end of the fiscal year where, you know, we're still trying to address the issue of negotiations.
But you see, those were the issues when we had Select Care, Net Care, okay, Take Care. They've already went through those hoops. Now that we have said that we are now self-insured, we are insuring ourselves, we are the insurers. There are certain parameters, there are certain things that the insurers have to provide to be able to become relevant and solvent, to protect the interest of those insured. Okay? And I'm sitting here 51 days when you have a 45-day time, and in some of these cases, it has to be approved within 45 days before you start to roll anything out.
I think, Senator, you, in the words that you read out, there has to be a policy. There is no policy.
There is. It's a law, Mr. Byrne. It's a law. It's right here in statute.
Senator, you read out that that this applies to a policy. We are not going to issue a policy.
You aren't we the insured? You say we are self-insured. What does that mean? We are insuring ourselves.
Okay. Well, obviously we're not going to agree on this.
Okay.
I will take what you say, and I will take it to our lawyer, who's the Attorney General, and I will ask him for his advice.
Please, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have run out of time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minority Leader Senator Blas. We are now going to. We're starting.
Chair,
yes,
on a point of
Vice
information,
Speaker.
just based on the previous discussions, just know as Oversight Chair of Human Resources, we've asked and requested that a hearing be set for next week, Friday on August 18th, hopefully when we take a recess at the request of more than several of our colleagues, but that the hearing will be on August 18th at 5:30, just for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker, for that information. I know my office has been calling your office to find a date, so once again, that's on the 18th of Friday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
Friday
ma'am.
at 5:30.
5:30.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of individuals, government and Guam employees who would like to listen to that hearing as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So next up, we have Senator, our chairman, Senator Joe San Augustine. He's up next. Senator Dwayne San-Nicolas is not here, so we have now Senator Joe San Augustine, our chairman of Appropriation.
I have no question. I'd just like to thank the panel for being here today, and we'll just move along. Thank you.
Thank
no,
you.
not yet. No, we still have 3 other senators. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Senator Kanata, do you have any questions for the panel? This is your second round.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panel. I just wanted to ask, can anyone answer whether or not there has been any interest collected on the rainy day fund? And if so, how much?
Yes, I did answer that, or partially answer that in answer to the Speaker. We did collect some. I can't tell you exactly how much.
Okay. Based on our current situation and the headlines lately regarding insurance, what is the statute that authorizes you to engage in self-insurance? Do you happen to know that?
4 GCA 4301A.
Okay, and who created that statute? The governor or the previous legislature?
No, it's in Guam Code annotated.
Okay. So effectively, all the self-insurance program does is what the legislature has instructed us to do of that type.
Permitted us to do, yes.
Okay. I was just curious. Well, other than that, thank you, panel. Keep up the good work. Have a great day.
Thank you, Senator Canasta. Senator Fisher, you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. I guess I'm a little bit at sea at this point, following Senator Blas. I guess, Mr. Byrne, did your attorneys, did I understand you correctly that they said you didn't need to get, as a self-insurer, Guam does not need to get any authorization or anything, or certificate of authorization from, I guess, the insurance commissioner?
Yes, to the best of my recollection.
Okay. Did he also, to the best of your recollection, did your attorney believe, well, I guess per force, he would not believe that if we engaged in self-insurance, we would not be an unauthorized insurer?
In I would say, 11 weeks of discussion, no, that never came up.
Okay. Your lawyers, did they communicate this to you in your role as DOA, or was this just general advice to, I don't know, the governor or what?
It was communicated to the negotiating team.
Okay. Are you a part of the negotiating team?
Yes.
Was it communicated to you in writing?
The Attorney General seems to not to want to commit to writing on this subject, so I think the answer must be no.
All right, just I'm going to pound on that one a little bit. Okay, so the Attorney General doesn't want to commit in writing to a event that might cost hundreds of millions of dollars?
Is that a question?
It's rhetorical, I suppose. But, I mean, you know, I'm an attorney, and that's just astounding. I mean, just for CYA, you'd think the Attorney General would reduce it to writing.
We asked him to, obviously, Senator.
And he says he doesn't want to?
That's what he said.
Yeah. That meeting with you all, it wouldn't have happened to have been tape recorded, would it?
Yes, it was procurement, so I think it was all tape recorded.
Oh, okay. Can the legislature have a copy of the tape recording?
If we have the recording, yes.
Okay, because probably this afternoon I'll probably do it right now on a piece of paper. I'll just write you a FOIA real quick. That might help. Okay, but all right, I'm going to move on from that, sir. Okay, if I could ask Ms. Shimizu a question. This is a little bit out of. I thought I heard you earlier say in the discussion on bingo that we don't tax the bingo halls.
So I went back to actually the limited gaming tax law, and I think the question was regarding senior citizen centers and the senior citizens, the applicability of the limited gaming tax to senior citizen centers. And there is so to clarify, because I went back to my team, it is possible for senior citizen centers, the two community senior citizen centers to be subject to the limited gaming tax if they conduct bingo not to the senior citizen members, or if they conduct bingo outside of the usual, I guess, the hours that the senior citizen center is open. So there is a portion of their activity that may be subject to the limited gaming tax. But again, if it's just during the normal course of the day, or perhaps they're just for their members to keep their senior citizen members busy during the day, and it's in the normal course of their activities, those are not subject to, per the law, not subject to limited gaming tax.
Well, that's pretty sweet. I mean, these bingo halls are bringing in serious money. But that's a question for a different day. But then I'm just wanted to follow up real quick. Okay, so the individual winnings are taxed.
Correct. There should be a Form W-2G, I believe, that is issued to individuals who receive or who win monies from those activities. I'm not sure if there's a floor for the issuance of those. Like, for example, for a 1099, there's a $600 floor. I don't exactly know the rules for the W-2G, but in general, yes, they should receive a tax form.
Okay, do they do the bingo halls, for want of a better word, the operators, do they collect the tax for you? Such as happens at a horse racing track, for example.
So, no, I don't believe that those are withheld. I believe they issue the forms W-2G, and I apologize, Senator, I don't believe they do, to the best of my knowledge.
So it's self-reporting, essentially?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say, do you think there's some slippage between what you're able to capture and what you should be able to capture?
Well, you know, I do believe that, of course, and this is why, you know, like, nothing is 100%, right? And whether it's speeding tickets and that's why we do have exams, and we do make sure we focus on certain items in order to do our audits. Or examinations. What I can say that I am happy to see in our agency, which is, I think, a very good sign that we've been able to progress in the area of collections of taxes, is what we've been able to do, and I've seen it because I've seen notices. I've had taxpayers approach me, and this is not specific to bingo, Senator Fisher, this is just for W-2s, 1099s, where we've been able to capture areas where an individual will file a tax return, and they have a Form W-2 that's associated with that. But when we're going to when we're going back and we're reconciling against the records for that employer or that organization or company, we're not finding them, so we're sending notices out to those organizations. And I've seen where because the penalties can be quite stiff. So because again, we've been working to try to get caught up with the processing of refunds, income tax returns, and other tax documents, we're starting to really see that. And so that's what, you know, again, we are very pleased about, and I want to give a shout out to my team for working really hard on that effort. But of course, nothing is 100%. But I believe that we're actually working to capture those better now. And in fact, I'm seeing it because I'm seeing people come in with these notices. And, you know, again, that's something that I'm not sure. I think if you talk with my team, I don't know that we've ever been to the point where we're able to actually, in a timely manner, match those things up and work to send out notices.
Okay, thank you. Do these bingo halls, again, do they have to report gross receipts as well as net to you?
They do file the Form 3260, and they do pay the limited gaming tax on those amounts that are being brought in through that tax.
Okay.
Or through, yes.
So the amount of money that's coming in is at least, even if you can't collect on it, at least you know how much is coming through the door?
Absolutely, and to go back to, I believe it was either Senator Brown or Senator Lujan's comments earlier, I think Senator Lujan, regarding the, you know, as I mentioned, in order to be able to obtain a bingo permit, you must, you know, apply annually or renew annually, just like a business license, and there's a process that's involved with that, to include, of course, clearances, various clearances from our branches. So, you know, again, there's a process for that. If there's an issue with regards to an organization, those are things that should be caught at that time.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. And then I forgot, I think it might have been Mr. Guerrero who stated that that withholding taxes are rising. Anybody can answer this who's got the expertise. Withholding taxes are rising, and that indicates more people are working. So a real quick follow-up to that. Is anybody on the panel, do you have the impression that Guam has reached full employment? Anybody? Bueller? You know? No?
Hi, Senator. I don't have an answer for that particular question, but I just wanted to comment that with respect to the increase in the withholding, and I believe it was mentioned earlier today and yesterday, part of it can be attributed to the 22% pay adjustment to the general pay plan for the Guam employees.
Okay.
So that has a positive effect on the figures that you're seeing here. And just keep in mind that that was just from April through September, and so our projection for 24 in terms of the revenues collected because of the pay adjustments is going to be higher.
Okay. During this period, there had been no change in the marginal tax rates. Is that correct?
With regards to tax rates, of course, the tax rates themselves, right? There's actual tax rate and then there's marginal tax rate. Okay. Of course, the tax rates get adjusted. And that's because we're mirror code, they get adjusted with what how the Internal Revenue Code or the IRS adjusts.
But either as to marginal or actual tax rate, there wasn't a change in that period? Because I'm wondering if I'm wondering if there was any other explanation. We just got one, that it was the 22%.
I'm sorry. Right, I apologize. Sorry. Yeah. Probably the last time that the actual tax rates were adjusted largely was TCJA, right? But I apologize. I'm talking about the amount of the, not the sorry, the exemption amount. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Sorry, forgive me. But you're right. The tax rates, we haven't seen a change in tax rates.
Okay, so, all right, so it looks like it's either because the withholding could be because of the 22% bump, but it may be that more people are working and the economy's starting to bubble a little bit. Okay, that's a possibility. Now, we've been talked a little bit about the increase in the business privilege tax. Are there any other, okay, we're trying to figure, we're trying to suss out whether or not the economy really is growing or not. Are there any other metrics we should look at other than withholding and an increase in BPT? Are there any other indicators? Hotel occupancy tax, anything like that?
Some information that we get monthly, which I've subscribed to, is GVB's monthly report on visitor arrivals. That's helpful. Okay. That helps us to determine what we're seeing, and they're really great at making sure they get that out monthly. I know Gary Hiles, I believe he was at the Special Economic Service, and likely he'll have a lot more information on unemployment. GITA also, as they go out, and they, of course, the Department of Administration and BBMR are involved when they do go out for the bond refinancing, and a lot of information is really kind of put together for that effort as well, Senator Fisher. So, but I believe GVB is a great source. GITA is a great source of information as well. I'm not sure if on the Invest Guam website they actually have some information, but Administrator Mendiola, she's a great person to talk to about perhaps the different indicators in terms of where our economy is going and how what the outlook is, okay. What kind of outlook we have.
Okay, and then I know you all are confident in your numbers, I know that. When you prepare a budget such as this, are there any generally accepted accounting principles that apply to the creation of a budget? Anything like that? Mr. Byrne.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Generally accepted accounting principles generally apply to financial reporting, not budgeting.
Okay.
But sound budgeting practices certainly would ensure that the numbers follow or don't depart too far from accepted practices. Okay. Otherwise, you have to have some control of and make sure the numbers don't look outlandish or ridiculous.
Okay, and I assume that you have adhered to sound budgeting principles?
Well, certainly in the past, when I don't have to do the budget for the government of Guam, we have a department, BBMR and OFB, to do it. But in the past, certainly, I certainly tried to.
Okay, well, I'd ask Steve, but there's Mr. Guerrero, but
OFB staff is here. If you have any questions they can answer it.
Okay, I just asked the same question to you. It's kind of a softball, actually, but did you follow generally accepted sound budgeting principles when you put this together?
Yes, budgeting principles for sure. Senator, like Edward Byrne said, accounting is different. We do a budgetary basis. So even when you see it in the audits, there's a schedule there it says unaudited, but it's really because we have a different basis. We're more like a cash basis. So it's what revenues we expect to collect in the fiscal year, and what we're gonna, and that's what will be utilized to appropriate to fund operations for the fiscal year.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Tello, you'd be the last, and then after that, yes, after you, and then I'll make the decision after that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'd like to thank, well, I don't think I even thanked you guys for being here. So Mr. Burns, Art, and Daphne, thank you so much for being here today, answering our questions. Without Lester, I felt that this is a lot more smoother since Lester's not here, actually. So that being said, a few questions. The rainy day fund, has the administration taken out any, this is Mr. Burns, have you taken out any money out of the rainy day fund this year for FY23?
No, Senator.
Okay. What is the balance of the rainy day fund currently?
I think I answered that in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In answer to a question by the speaker.
Oh,
it's,
okay.
It's around about 36 million.
36 million.
In
okay.
total. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry I missed that. About 36 million. Thank you. Appreciate it. So nothing was taken out. Also, with compact impact that I asked earlier on compact impact, about how much of compact art, maybe you can answer this one. How much will the general fund, based on your cursory review of the substituted budget, how much of general fund money is going to be used right now to cover the shortfall of compact or not having compact impact?
Senator, other than the school leaseback, there are no annual commitments that are drawing from compact impact.
Right.
So basically, that would mean that there's just we don't have that as a source
right.
To use for in the past we've used it for police vehicles, fire trucks. We've also assisted GMH with pharmaceuticals and so forth.
Okay, Art, I guess my question is, if you're familiar with this budget bill, how much of general fund money is going to be used to cover these shortfalls from compact impact? What we're used to paying for, like the schools. Maybe I could ask OFB that question. Art, if you're not familiar with that, because they're the one so how much of general fund money are we going to be using to cover what compact impact used to cover?
This is for the bond for certificates of participation to 5.7 million.
So 5.7 million of general fund money will be used to cover, okay, so 5.5 million, okay. And of the current bonds that we have, I've noticed that there are additional bonds for this year that we have to pay on. What is the amount of those additional bonds that we have to pay this year that we didn't pay in FY23?
That was the only additional one. The variance between what we used to pay and now is because, as Director Byrne has stated earlier, the refinancing. So there's higher debt service this fiscal year.
So we're paying a bond of $5 million from the general fund that was normally paid for by compact impact funds. Okay, so I have here current bonds, new bonds that have come into play at 13 million.
Again, Senator, it's not a new bond, it's just, it was refinanced about 2 years ago.
Right, right, and
so
now we have to start paying on
it's a
it,
higher
right? Okay, so we've been given lenience for a couple years, right? Maybe I should have rephrased that, I'm sorry. But we've been given lenience, the bond was done, refinanced 2 years ago. We didn't have to pay for 2 years, now we have to pay in FY24. And how much additional funding do we have to pay for these bonds? Is it 13 million? Not additional bonds, but these particular bonds that are now that we have to pay for, how much?
About 22 million.
22 million total?
22.
That's different from 2023.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so it's not 13 million, it's actually 22 million. Those numbers don't seem right. Can you pause? Let her look at the numbers, and okay.
Yeah, so the other increase aside from the 13 million and then the additional 5.7 for the compact, there's another 4.4 million for the limited obligation business privilege tax 2021 E&F series. So there's also an increase there.
So that's almost 20, how much?
22.5 million altogether.
Okay. And this is money that we did not pay in FY25. I mean, FY23, right?
Correct. This is
So this is a brand new bill for us for FY24, $22 million, correct? Well, that we have to, okay, that's quite a bit. The AS400, Mr. Byrne, how much do we have to pay for the AS400 this year?
Could you be, please, may I ask you to be a little bit more specific?
Sure. I believe you have a new AS400.
Oh, we have a new system. It's not going to be on the AS400.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so you have a new system for accounting of a DOA,
yes,
right? And what are you calling that?
It's called Project Liberty, I think, but
Project
I call it the FMIS system, right? FMIS.
Okay. So how much are we paying yearly for that this year for FY2024?
For 24, it's 8.4 million.
How much do we pay in FY23?
We're paying, it's like 7.8 million, something like that.
We paid that in 23? Okay.
We're paying it in yes. We're paying for, it's not annual charge, we're paying for the development and the processing.
Sure. Okay. Is there going to be a shortfall in retirement for FY23 on the for the retirees for health? Will there be a shortfall? Anticipated shortfall, Mr. Byrne?
No, we're working to make sure that there isn't a shortfall on retirees. And that includes getting the right amount of funding, but also
we're talking about 2023, not 24.
Yes, it's an ongoing process that we're going to continue in 24 of making sure that as many retirees as possible take advantage of the Medicare supplement that we offer, and that puts them into a position where Medicare is primary, and our current policy and our new self-insured plan will not have to bear their cost.
We were appropriating $34.5 million for FY23. What is the amount right now for retirement? In FY23, we appropriated $34.5 million.
I think we're going to be, maybe we're going to be 1 or 2 million over, but not 5 million like it was in 22.
Okay, because I'm showing here from OFB that there was it may go up to 39 million for FY24.
Yeah, well that would seem to track pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you think it's going to stay, and even with this new health insurance, self-insured, we're going to stay within the 34.5 mil?
It sounds about right.
Okay. Is there any ARP funding that the governor has set aside to help pay for some of the expenses of our agencies?
Yes, Senator, and that is outlined in the monthly reports that are transmitted over to the legislature.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Art, when we see that, it seems to change every month. You know, we're seeing money being taken out of one agency and put into another agency, and then lo and behold, a new agency comes up, taken from it. So it's not constant, you know, moving forward. What is the balance right now to date?
I'm sorry, I don't have the report in front of me, but I believe when I did a quick look at the bottom line levels in terms of what's been expended and encumbered, we're looking at about 2/3 of the 500 million. So about 1/3 of that is unobligated as of the last report.
1/3?
About 1/3, yes.
Okay, of that 500 and, okay. Mr. Byrne or Daphne, you know, relative to the collections of unpaid taxes, how are unpaid taxes for prior fiscal years accounted for? Are they made available to the current general fund, or how does that work?
I can answer my part of that,
Okay.
Senator. Whatever is collected within a fiscal year is credited to the general fund for that year.
I see. So it's part of the CRER?
Yes.
Okay, even if it was something that was owed 2 years ago?
Yes, and DOA wouldn't necessarily know that.
Well, okay. So I was wondering how that would happen for late payment coming in. So, Mr. Byrne, I put in front of you the CRER report of September 2022. It's page 3. I put it in front of you to look at. Okay, and I just have a question on that because, you know, it's unfortunate we don't have the audit report for 2022. I'm sorry, it's 2022, not 23. A lot of numbers are going around. At the bottom of page 3, it says appropriations for FY22 general fund balance, you know, per Public Law 36-107. It says unappropriated balance, talks about the Office of Accountability, Guam Water Authority, and it says unappropriated balance. And then it goes further down and says audited surplus balance. Can you explain the difference between the two and how that works?
I'd like to give you a really detailed explanation of that, but I think I'm not really going to be able to. The legislature, as it went through passing certain laws, used different types of wording to appropriate sums of money from the fiscal 22 fund balance. Some of it was excess revenues, some of it was audited fund balance, and some of it was just the fund balance. So I can't really give you a very clear definition of it because it all depended upon what wording was used in each statute.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Art, since this is created by BBMR, can you explain the difference between unappropriated and audited surplus balance?
I think she's right.
Yeah, sorry, Senator. I'll probably have to get back to you on an answer for that particular question.
Okay, I really would like that very much. You know, we're trying to understand the reports that come to us, and instead of just like, you know, letting it go.
Senator, if I could refer you to page 8 and 9 of the current CRER, I think it's set out a little better and it's a little bit more understandable because it's grouped into those definitions that I just talked about.
Okay, and you're talking about the current one. Okay, so I'm on page 8 you're talking about? 8?
8 and 9.
Okay, it's right here.
Yeah, that's correct. And I believe I spoke about that earlier today when the question came up about appropriations from FY23 revenue sources versus those from FY22 appropriations. So yes, Director Byrne is correct in that we have the appropriations and corresponding expenditures to those particular appropriations from FY22 sources.
Okay. Unfortunately, we didn't have that in the 22 CRER report for September, so, okay, now it's a little bit more clear with regards to this. So let's go to the Public Law 37-15 that was recently passed this year as well, and which is the LEAP program. Mr. Byrne, has any money been paid out for this $15 million that we had and I think this was excess revenue?
No, Senator.
Yeah.
No money has been paid out.
No money has been paid out, the $15 million for the LEAP. Is there any intention of paying it out?
My intentions is not my job. I'm going to refer to my colleague.
Do you have the money to pay it out then? Let's put it that way.
Well, again, you know, our concentration at the moment is on typhoon recovery, and our funds, as we talked about earlier, the funds need to be advanced before FEMA reimburses them. So our concentration at the moment is keeping enough funds in the bank to pay for all the recovery items before we pay anything else.
Okay, so let's say at the end of FY23, there is no funding left available to pay for this. Does it become a deficit?
Well, even if paid, you know, unfortunately, this is the budgetary basis that I was talking about. Any expenditure on an accounting basis will affect next year. So there's like $68 million worth of total appropriations which have been appropriated in different ways from the fiscal 22 fund balance that will become an expenditure in the year that it gets expended.
Basically, it becomes a deficit.
Yeah.
So, yes. Mr. Byrne, and Public Law 37-16, which is the GPA credit, it was in twofold in this one. 15 million was of excess FY22, and 10 million of that was excess 23. Of the FY22 excess revenue, I mean, I tried to look in the CRER report under that paper that I gave you, and I didn't see anything under there, so it must have been because, you know, we passed this bill, you know, after that report was taken out. We understand that. So have you utilized any of the excess revenue, $15,581,000? Have you given, because we're done by next month. Next month is the last day of the GPA. So are you using money from excess revenue FY22 for the 15 million?
Yes, Senator, you're right that the fiscal 22 CRER predated the law that provided for the GPA credit. Right. We've been paying the credits each month, so by the end of next month we will pay out the whole amount from both appropriations. From both appropriate and then excess revenue. Okay, so, yeah, that's right. Okay, I have one more question. Baby Amar, yesterday you mentioned that we are tracking about 5 million for July. And when I was speaking with OFB yesterday, I believe we were talking about the anticipated 10 million a month until the end of the fiscal year. Do you happen to have those figures today? Is it 5 million or 10 million that you're tracking right now?
Based on the figures that we ran as of about a week ago, our net unobligated projected general fund revenue level, this is after you take out the amounts for the appropriation for LEAP in 3715, as well as the third round of the GPA credit in 3716 of 10.7 million. As of the June report, it's at 11.1 million, but based on our preliminary numbers for July, which again is unofficial, and it'll be reflected, you'll see the actual figures once the report is officially transmitted, no later than the 20th, but we're looking at 15.66 million.
So it's about 5.6 million increase, right?
That's correct.
So it's a far, so OFB, I know you were basing your projections of this budget on, CRER reporting or tracking, basically on tracking. That's what you've always mentioned. Because it's not tracking the 10 million that's been anticipated, do you think you've overprojected?
No, Senator. When we were mentioning my director mentioned 10 million per month. That was just on the, I believe it was the corporate tax. He was just trying to do a line item because this 99 million you're discussing is a variance of all the different sources of income.
Okay, what was your assessment then for the next 3 months coming, OFB, on your tracking?
So yeah, for each item, there's a different methodology.
All in all.
So like I said, all in all, the bottom line when we talked yesterday was about 99 million from the original, from 2023 budget. So
no, I'm talking about, okay, so when you're doing your budget bill, you're trying to, you're going based on tracking, right? So the question is, when you were assessing this, you looked at July, August, and September, which of course is, you don't know what that is, but you're guesstimating what that would be. So my question is, what was that guesstimate?
Again, so
for July as a whole, on page 3, when it ends, as a whole, the bottom line, how much additional revenue did you think you were going to receive in July and August and September, each month though?
So if you want me to go line by, it's not a total because for each one, for example, corporate, we didn't just do an average what we're collecting per month. For our tracking, we utilize a percentage of collections. Like at this point in time last year, what was the percentage we collected? So each line has different kinds of method, whether it be an average of what we're collecting per month. For like withholding, we did utilize what we were collecting an average per month.
Okay, Luella, let's do it. Okay, so let's do it this way. Page 3 of the CRER report for June 2023. At the bottom it says net unobligated projected general fund revenues, 11,147,619. What did you anticipate for the CRER report for July 2023? In that section on page 3 where it says net unobligated projected revenues, what did you guys anticipate for that month?
What is this one? OFB tracking. Senator, so overall, what we are tracking, BBMR was at the gross of 889. In total, we were tracking around 919.
919?
Yes, over gross revenue, and that's based on our various methods. BBMR is more conservative, so a lot of times when we're averaging out, again, to get 2024 revenues, we were
That's
using...
9 million more for July?
No, it's overall, all the way till September. When you say tracking, it's what we expect for the whole fiscal year. So
in excess revenue, because that's what it says, unobligated. How much in excess revenue do you plan on, are you estimated to have at the end of September?
Oh, so ours, we have an excess of, from the original budget, our tracking is 109 from the original budget of, So 809 was the original budget, and our tracking is showing about as much as high as 919, our methods. Again, we utilize BBMR's tracking for when we were forecasting because for the more conservative figures.
What are you saying by 919? What is that?
That's total. So BBMR's report, if you could see, their tracking was 889.2 or 0.3, right? Yes. And the CRU report?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, page 3.
Yes.
Where?
There's a 889.3 million tracking.
Okay, I see it, right?
Yes. That's the gross revenues that they're tracking from, although the report said June, tracking is all the way till September.
Okay, and then your guesstimate for
And
this
ours was higher, and we're coming in at 919.
919 million?
Yes.
Okay, more. That's what your guesstimate is, right?
Yes.
Okay, and right now, BBMR just said 5 million in additional for the month of, in excess revenue for the month of July. And so maybe it'll keep trending 5 million every month after that. Is that still lower than what you've anticipated?
There's also a difference because BBMR's method, for their tracking, they really utilize what was allocated based on the original Appropriation Act. They put aside, they submitted a report of a 12-month tracking, or how the 12-month revenues will come in. So for the remaining 3 months, that's what they utilize. So it's not really adjusted based on what the trend is coming in. So that's why we have much higher, because we're following the actual percentage collections, average per month.
Okay, thank you for that. So my last question is to Art and Mr. Burns. Is the administration happy with the estimated projected revenues on this substituted budget? Do they agree?
Yes, we're in the position, not often happens, but happily it's happening this year, where we're generally very comfortable with the OFB numbers for revenues.
Okay, Art, as a BBMR employee?
Yes, I agree as well. The same question was asked, I believe, earlier this morning, and,
okay.
We're responding the same.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you, Daphne, too, for your assistance here. And Mr. Chair, I end that questioning based on that. Okay.
Thank you, Senator Tello. My colleagues, we have completed the 2 rounds of questions. The panelists will now be excused. A reminder that amendments will not be entertained until after the panel is dismissed. And as you all have a copy of the rules of engagement, amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk, Session Drive at guamlegislature.org. Amendments not submitted in writing to the clerk and uploaded to the Google Drive prior to the start of that chapter or section will be called out of order. So in other words, today, and as I finish reading the rules, just a reminder, amendments will be addressed on a first-come, first-served basis, acknowledged by the timestamp as it is received by the clerk's office. Only amendments received before the start of that chapter, or when we go to the 3rd round, will be addressed in the order it's received. If you submit an amendment to the clerk and replace or amend the amendment later, the time stamp of the replacement will be the amendment's new time of the receipt by the clerk. Discussion on any amendment will allow the author of the amendment 10 minutes to introduce the amendment, and all others will be allowed 5 minutes to discuss the proposal. The author will have 5 minutes to close the amendment. Then when we're done with that, and we close this chapter, I will ask if there are any questions or comments on the section. If none, we'll declare the section or chapter completed. And we will close on that. Okay? So at this point, it is 4:25. We will recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Please, if you got amendments, get it in. Because when we start tomorrow morning, if it's after 9 o'clock, when we are called back to order, I will not entertain any more amendments once we start. All right? We'll recess till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you. And before, excuse me, I need to release first the panel. I'd like to first thank the panel for being here. Ms. Daphne Simizu, Mr. Art Mariano, Mr. Ed Byrne, and OFB is in a rush to leave also, Steve Guerrero, Llewellyn, and Vanessa. It's when we start the chapters that the speaker asked that OFB will be available. They won't be far. They already nodded okay when we start chapter 2 and on, just so that we have an understanding of what's going on. All right? And I thank you all, panel. You are now dismissed. Go ahead, Daph. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you for being here. We still need money from you when you collect. Thank you. And with that, we'll now recess till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Please, folks, if we can all make it at 9 and start at 9, it would be great. Thank you.